Welcome everyone to the webinar. Let's get the chat rolling. Where are you from? What issues are you having with the gym? Why are you potentially not seeing results? The whole focus of this webinar is to share some wisdom with you guys to solve any issues which you may be having. Because realistically, like we've all been there where we go to the gym, we're trying to put all our best efforts into eating right, training right, but we still don't necessarily see the results which we want to get. And most of the time, it's not necessarily down to lack of effort, it's just lack of knowing the right things to do. And it can be confusing in today's day and age because realistically, there's so much garbage which is circulating around social media. People doing these novel, unnecessary exercises to try and get some sort of magical results instead of just doing the basics over and over again over a long period of time. So today, I've got a little presentation of some of the most important points which I think are going to help you out with some of the issues which you are facing. Throughout, please do ask questions because every so often I'm going to come down to the chat, I'm going to read some of your questions and we'll have a little backwards and forwards. So starting off with the absolute essentials that you need inside of the gym when you are training, okay? If you can just master these key things, you're going to make the sessions as effective as possible. It's all about quality over quantity, okay? So first thing, without a doubt, you've got to master how to lift with proper form. Now, I'm sure most of you guys who are watching this, you've seen how I lift, right? There's a very specific way I lift. It's almost like it's robotic, okay? That didn't naturally just come straight away. That came from a lot of practice. And more importantly, always reflecting upon a working set which I've done and thinking about, did I do that as best as I could? Is there room for improvement? Maybe I need to film myself so I can see how that looked from a different angle that I can't see, okay? You should always be striving to lift with impeccable form. Next point is resting long enough. Now I know there's like a debate of like how long you should rest. You know, some people just like to blast through their sessions resting like 60 seconds in between sets. But realistically, especially when you're doing a big compound lifts, which are quite taxing, quite demanding, you need to rest as long enough so that you can match or improve upon the previous set's intensity. So I use my Whoop band. I just wait until my heart rate has come down to below 120 at least, and then bam, I'm ready to go again. Okay, but obviously you don't want to go to the absolute opposite of that and rest for too long because you're just wasting your time, right? You don't want to be in the gym for too long. Third point, lift heavy, right? This probably the most important thing you need to do. If you just keep lifting the same weight week after week after week, your body is not going to change, okay? There needs to be some sort of progressive overload. Mechanical tension overload is the key to building muscle, getting stronger. Now, obviously, I don't expect you to lift heavy from the start. It's better that you perfect form first, then gradually start lifting heavier week after week. Next point, maintain tension on the working muscle. This is quite similar to lifting with proper form. You need to try and place the tension caused by the weight that you're lifting and keep it on the working muscle group. Don't let other muscle groups take over. Next point, train hard. Now, this is something which is quite interesting. There's a lot of people who I see in the gym and they need to be pushing a little bit harder. They need to be getting a little bit angry. I like to call it controlled rage, right? For beginners, you don't necessarily need to unleash this beast to begin with, but if you want to get bigger, you want to get stronger, you have to get a little bit nasty, right? You have to, let the beast within come out, right? If you're too calm, too peaceful, you refuse to get a little bit uncomfortable, the results are just not going to come. So you need to learn how to unleash that beast within, and you will have it. Sweet spot for training, in my opinion, is like an hour. It can vary from time to time. 75 minutes, like an hour and a quarter, I would say is like the upper end. You don't really need to be in the gym for longer than that. And if you are, you're probably following the wrong program or you're just fucking around a little bit too much. 45 minutes, I'd say, would be the least amount of time that you need. Okay, if you're doing anything less than that, you're not going to be able to fit in as much volume. You could try plow through a workout and race through it as fast as possible with short rest periods, but because the rest periods would be so short, you're not giving your body adequate time to rest in between those sets. Maintaining focus, extremely crucial, right? Focus is this ability to lock in for the time that you're in the gym and not get distracted. And there's a lot of distractions in the gym. There's people doing mad stuff. There's maybe people coming up to you wanting to chat. There's all notifications coming through on your phone. These are all massive distractions which are taking you away from the thing which you are supposed to be doing. You need to get locked in, you need to get in the zone, right? So I would recommend temporarily just at least muting the notifications or disabling the apps just for a short period of time so you do not get distracted. There's nothing worse than getting a really damning message from a partner or a business partner, something which can completely throw you off and take you away from the session itself. And then exercise selection. A lot of people are doing the wrong exercises, right? The key that you need to think about is just getting very good at a select few exercises because they will give you the majority of the results. You'll see a lot of fitness influencers doing these funky exercises, mostly because it's new, it looks different, and it's got usually drives high engagement. But ultimately, it's just the key basic exercises that work. It's not that sexy, but if you get good at doing it, then you will see results. Now, as I mentioned before, progressive overload is the key. And we want to try and think, how do we get from a point at week 1 to lifting heavier at a point in week 5? Hopefully everybody can see this. If you can't, I'm just going to read it out to you. We have an example here where someone is lifting, let's say for example, they're doing bench press. They can do 8 reps of 20 kilograms. How can they progress to do 24 kilograms of 8 reps on week 5 or week 4, right? Ideally, there's one way of doing it where you could just gradually increase the weight each week. You keep the reps the same. 21 kilograms, 22, 23, 24. Now, unfortunately, most gyms don't have increments that go up like that. They're usually in 2.5s or 2 kilogram increments. So what you could do, you could either do gradually higher reps with 20 kilograms, 8 reps with 22 kilograms, progress that gradually each week. Or you could, if the target number of reps was 8, you could maybe do 7 reps with a heavier weight and then gradually increase that. Or you can mix and match, right? There's a couple of different ways that you can do it, but don't just think, okay, I have to immediately take this big leap to lifting an extra 2-3 kilograms on a weekly basis, because to see that kind of progression and overload in a short period of time is unlikely, right? Even if you just increase the weight by 1 kilogram or even sometimes 0.5 kilograms, that's going to be enough. Ultimately, we just want to increase the amount of weight that we're lifting. Now, a few mistakes which people make regarding the training session is training fasted, first of all. If you want to maximize your performance, then you need to have some food in your system. The only time that I would train fasted is if you're going to be training very early on in the morning, okay? If I wake up at like 6 o'clock and I want to train at 7, I'm not really going to eat much before that session. Okay, so I will do that session. I'll have some maybe electrolytes throughout the session. I'll have maybe some maltodextrin, some sugar just to keep me training hard, and then maybe some amino acids during the session itself. The longer the day goes by, the more detrimental the session is going to be if you are in a fasted state, okay? I would always recommend eating 1 to 2 hours before the session. This gives you enough time to digest it, and it allows you to perform at your best. Preparing your program is key, so you need to follow some sort of a program, and knowing what it is that you need to do before going to the gym is just going to take all that unnecessary wasted time and energy away from thinking about, okay, well, what are we doing today? Going to the gym, oh, well, what should we start with? What weight should I be lifting? You're asking yourself too many questions. You're trying to improvise and make everything up on the spot, when realistically, what you need to do is already have a game plan. You go into the gym to execute, and you don't need to be thinking or worrying about what you should be doing next. Literally, everything out is in front of you. You just need to execute and lift the damn weight. When and where to train. This is something which is quite interesting. Some people are like, oh, well, is training in the morning the best or training in the evening the best? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's training when you can fit it in. Some people are lucky, like me, where I can pick and choose what time of the day I do train. It does get a little bit harder now with other work commitments, but I have like a sweet spot in the day, which is between like 11, 2 o'clock. I've done it so often that I'm almost like priming my body to train then, like it knows when it's time to train. If you train in the morning, first thing, very early on, fasted state, that's not a problem. If you want to train in the evening after work, that's not a problem either. But you need to ask yourself, realistically, when is a time of the day that you can be consistent with training? If you know yourself that if you've been training at work all day and you need to go to the gym, then you're going to be probably a little bit tired and you won't necessarily understand, okay, this is not a good time to be training if I'm going to be consistently missing it. Let's go answer some questions in the chat before I ramble on. Right. Let's have a look. I need to lose around 15 to 20 kilograms and I have a lot of belly fat. I'm doing a lot of training, don't see a lot of results. What's the fastest way to lose it and also to gain muscles? This is quite an interesting one, and I notice a lot of guys have this focus and goal of losing weight. There's nothing wrong with that, but realistically, the goal should be, okay, I want to lose body fat. If the goal is to lose weight, then you're just going to constantly be in this endless loop of trying to get lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And ultimately, like if say, for example, your starting point is 90 kilograms, why would you want to end up at 70 kilograms? You'll just be a skinnier, more feeble version of yourself. So that, first of all, you need to switch the goal. The goal should be to lose body fat. In order to do that, I've got a few diagrams in the presentation that will explain in more detail how that can be done, but it just needs to be very gradual. Fat loss is gradual, okay? But stay tuned because I'm going to answer your question in more detail with graphs. Would you recommend sauna a few times a week to help recovery after a weight session? And what supplement would you recommend after using saunas? Supplement after saunas, electrolytes, just because you've lost a lot of water, you need to rehydrate yourself and get those essential vitamins back into your system, especially if you've lost them. Sauna, I don't think it will have a huge impact on recovering the muscle, in my opinion. I think the best thing that you can do is just sleep and rest and get to a point where you're not actually overtraining where you're so sore in the first place. Okay? Sauna use is more so for longevity and overall health as opposed to maximizing recovery in between sessions. So I do recommend doing them, but not necessarily doing it for the goal of recovering damaged muscle tissue. Do you have any underrated shoulder rehab or warm-up routines that most lifters overlook but make a real difference? Hanging from a bar. I don't know if you have seen me do this in some recent videos. One of the best things that you can do, not only to decompress your spine, but to just prime yourself for a session and help with shoulder mobility, is to hang for a bar as long as you can do. You can do this with the assistance of using the wrist straps. It means you'll be able to hold on for longer, but you could also do it without wrist straps, and this would help to improve grip strength. So it depends what the goal is. I do a combination of both, because when I do the wrist straps, it means that I can hold on to that bar for an extremely long period of time. Not too long, but like 3 minutes would be the goal. So let's get back to the board. There was quite a few questions which I saw regarding the optimal number of sets per week. Now, a lot of people seem to think that, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do more because more is better. If I do more sets, if I do more reps, then that means I'm going to grow faster, which is not true. It gets to a certain point where once you've hit the sweet spot, whereby the optimal amount of volume is going to give you the best returns in terms of growth, that you actually see diminishing returns, where the muscle or the body is overtrained and anything extra is just garbage. So usually, if you're doing a session and you're doing more than 18 working sets per session, in my opinion, that would be overkill. Unless you're the type of person who is a beginner and maybe you're just trying to familiarize yourself with the exercises and you want to get the reps in so you can perfect the execution, you don't need to be doing more than 18 sets, okay? It's too much. Once upon a time, I did that, right? I used to think doing more was better, but ultimately I was absolutely wiped out after the session. I just wanted to go to bed. The quality of my other sessions was impacted. Couldn't get a pump. Strength was actually on the decline, and I actually started to not enjoy sessions and get like flu-like symptoms. Same thing goes for going to the gym like 6 to 7 times per week. This is overkill. You don't need to do that. People come up to me and they're like, oh, you must like go to the gym every day. Realistically, I'm going to the gym 5 times per week, right? I have to stop myself from going more than that because it's not going to be good for me. But I could maintain my physique now, realistically, of going to the gym 4 times per week because the sessions are dialed in, the programming is dialed in, and I know exactly what it is that I need to do. Okay, so don't think you need to go 6 to 7 times per week. You need that time to rest and recover. Ideally, you have a rest day after 2 or 3 consecutive days of training. You'll notice the quality of the session after a rest day is going to be much better. Same thing goes for high rep sets, right? Doing sets where you're doing 12 reps, 15 reps or more, absolutely not necessary, okay? And if you just, all it will do is increase the amount of fatigue that your body experiences, and you need more time to recover in between those sessions, which is not what we want. Right, you're doing the wrong split, probably. Most of you guys are either not even following a split, or unless you're on my app. If you're on my app, you're probably doing the right split. But most people, they either wing it, make up their own split, or they're not following a split at all. So I will summarize for you the best 3, 4, or 5 day splits that you should follow. Starting off with the 3-day, I did mention this in another video, but we'll go through it again. Now, full body, very good. Muscle groups, getting hit 3 times per week. We are looking to train a muscle 2 to 3 times per week. That is optimal. Once per week is not going to be enough. Unless you're an absolute madman, like Dorian Yates, who trains with the utmost level of intensity, it's just not going to work. Upper, lower, full body, very good. Upper, lower, upper, very good. You do the upper, upper, lower if you're focusing on hitting your upper body a little bit more. But if you want to get the leg sessions or the legs hit twice per week, you do the full body. Push-pull legs, I am not a big proponent of doing push-pull legs if you're only going to go to the gym 3 times per week, okay? If you do push-pull legs rest, push-pull legs rest, push-pull legs rest, that's fine. But if you're going to do it once per week, not recommended. So we get rid of that one. Also, posterior, anterior, full body, also quite good, but not quite as popular. 4-day splits, let's have a look. Again, full body, yes. Upper, lower, or full body, yes. Push-pull legs, upper, good. Your legs might take a little bit of hit because you only hit your legs once per week, but I know most people don't have the goal of having jacked legs. Horizontal push-pull legs, vertical push-pull, arm, chest, delts. Good. 5-day splits. These are all on the app, by the way, in case you were wondering. Again, full body, very good. Upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower. That was probably one of my favorite splits. Push-pull legs, upper, lower. The one which I've just done, one of my favorites. Horizontal push-pull legs, vertical push-pull legs, chest, delts, arms. Cool, let's go back to the questions. I can unlock my phone. Oh, God, there's a lot of questions in the chat. Does heart rate matter when working out? Probably wouldn't be something I'd be that concerned about when training. Obviously, if you're doing a working set, the heart rate is going to be high. When it would be a concern is when you go back to doing that set again. So I would not go back into my second set or third set if my heart rate is high. I wait for it to drop, then I do it again. But you will notice there's a trend. The heart rate overall, if you take this session as a whole during a leg day, on average is higher compared to other body parts trained. Thoughts on creatine? Should I take it 1 to 2 hours before my workout? Creatine, fantastic. As far as I'm aware, from all the studies done, there's no detrimental side effects to taking creatine. Timing does not matter, just as long as you get it in every day. And if your goal is to get stronger and put on size, it can massively help. Also, new studies showing that it can help with mental performance as well. So I would definitely recommend. How not to get too sore after a workout? Great question. And I went through that talking about the volume. If you're too sore after a workout, it basically means that you did too many working sets on a particular muscle group, which is why it's better for you to do a little bit less volume and do more muscle groups in one session. That's the best way to eliminate it. Of course, as well, it helps with consistency. So the more frequently you train, as in like you're training every week, the likelihood is you're not going to get as sore compared to if you take a prolonged period of time off training. So I've noticed this mostly when it comes to training legs. If I, for whatever reason, don't train my legs for over a week, like 2 weeks, and then I go and smash my legs again, they're going to be absolutely in pieces. And I'm going to struggle to walk for a couple of days. So how do I get around that? How do I still train legs but not be sore the next day? The key is to train the legs, but maybe just do 2 or 3 lower body exercises. Maybe just do 2 working sets. And then for the rest of the session, do other muscle groups. So it's more of a full body workout. Most people who train full body are very unlikely to say to you, oh, I was really sore after the full body workout. They don't get that sore because they're training one muscle group in the session. Whereas if you're doing a bro split and you spend the whole session annihilating your chest, of course your chest is going to be very sore for a couple of days because you've just done an excessive amount of volume on it and you're just not conditioned to tolerate that amount of volume. So if you follow suitable programming where there's not excessive amounts of volume or reps, you can actually avoid getting sore, but still have a very effective session. Can form be, great question, Will. Can form be too good? Slow and controlled reps, but on less weight rather than half decent form, but slightly quicker. So I've seen this as well when people get a little bit too obsessed with form, perfect form and slow tempo. If you're always obsessing about slow tempo, time and attention, and perfect form, the problem with that is it actually makes it very difficult for you to lift heavier. And you're maybe not prioritizing lifting heavier, which means that there is no additional mechanical tension. Okay? So you're basically making it much harder for yourself to lift heavier. My recommendation would be to not be too concerned about the tempo as much and the slower negatives. Yes, always lift with control. Always be under control, but you can speed the reps up a little bit. Be a little bit more explosive with the concentric. And then, of course, if form gets a little bit sloppy, inevitably that's going to happen. But, you know, if you're going for a PR, it's okay for it to be a little bit sloppy as long as you're not putting yourself at risk in terms of injury, because that's a big problem. You don't want to injure yourself. Full body 3 times a week versus push-pull legs twice a week. This is where it gets a little bit, as I mentioned before, if you're doing push-pull legs twice a week, that's 6 sessions in a week, which is borderline doing too much in my opinion. I would probably space that out and do push-pull legs over an 8 or 9 day period, if that makes sense. So it's not, you're not squeezing that in a 7-day period. But again, it's obviously if you're doing more sessions compared to doing full body 3 times a week, you're going to see more progress by doing more sessions, right? Up until a certain point. That would be my answer. What do I think of low volume? One main set for each exercise. I feel like it's helped me with the focus and controlled rage for big sets. I think, in my honest opinion, one all-out working set probably would not be enough for most people. I don't think people have the ability to push that hard just to do one set. I think doing 2 sets would make a lot more sense. I've definitely found from my training experience, doing 2 hard sets versus 3 hard sets. When I do 3 hard sets, I don't go all in on the first set because I'm thinking, oh, I've got another 2 loads of this to go. Whereas when it's just 2, it's like, okay, we've cut that down by a third, and now all I have to do is put all of my efforts into 2 working sets. And for me, I feel like that is absolutely fine. I think if you do 1 working set, you're probably not going to be hitting that sweet spot in terms of optimal volume. Would you recommend having a protein shake after training fasted in the morning or eat breakfast, especially when you're starting work in the office around 8 a.m.? I would probably have the shake after the session. Again, because it just allows me to maybe wake up a little bit later. I can do my thing, go to the gym. I'd have a iced Americano. I'd have maybe some branched chain amino acids, electrolytes at the ready. I'd smash my session. This is assuming, obviously, of course, that I've had a decent meal the night before. And then after the session, you want to get some nutrients into your system as quickly as possible. And then I don't know what your work is like, but I would try and just squeeze a little bit more food into my system throughout the morning. Back to the whiteboard. Right then, where were we? A quick one on when to change split. Usually they should last between 5 to 10 weeks. In my app, they're 5 weeks. That tends to be a pretty good sweet spot. But if everything is going fine, you're enjoying it, you're making progress, just repeat it again for another 5 weeks. There's no problem with that. When you need to switch is when there's no more progress. Okay, you can't lift more weight. You're plateauing on a lot of the exercises which you're doing. If you're bored, of course, you're just bored of doing the same thing over and over again, there's nothing wrong with changing things up and making it a little bit more exciting. If you want to focus on other muscle groups, maybe lagging muscle groups, this usually happens after a certain period of time, you may need to follow a split that is going to hit specific muscle groups more than others. And for me, this is what I tend to do. With each split, I have 1 to 2 muscle groups which are the priority during that point in time. After I've done that split, either I keep it the same or I change it to maybe focus on other muscle groups. It's very cyclical. And because some people tend to be genetically gifted, or maybe they just have a superior response to training specific muscle groups. For example, my chest, I never really had a problem training my chest. So a split that I follow, I would probably only need to hit chest once per week. But other muscle groups which are not as prominent as the chest, I would want to hit that more frequently, maybe even 3 times per week. And then, of course, training availability. If you were training 5 times per week, but you were finding it quite difficult to be consistent with that 5 times per week, then just pull back to a 4-day split, okay? They're the times when I would change the split. High reps versus low reps. This is a big debate at the moment, I feel like, in the fitness industry. Now, I would only go for high reps, and we're talking like above 10 reps, if the focus is for you to master the exercise. Doing more reps gives you more opportunity to perfect how you execute an exercise. Okay, for everybody else, I'm not a big believer in going above 10 repetitions. Now, I've spoken to a few people in the industry, experts, and their general answer to that, especially Brad Schoenfeld, for example, he was on the podcast. He likes to use a variety of rep ranges for different exercises. So we're talking like 5 all the way up to 15 plus, which is a very vague answer. It doesn't really answer the question. But from my experience, going lower rep, 5 to 8, I've noticed my strength go up massively, and I've noticed size. Not that my size has really changed, but I feel like I'm pretty big when I do that. What you need to understand is the last 5 repetitions of a set are the most important. So if you were doing 15 reps and the last 5 were the most important, the first 10 isn't really doing anything but building up this unnecessary fatigue. Whereas if you were doing 6, 7, or 8 reps, maybe the first 1 or 2 reps don't count a whole lot. It's just kind of like getting you into the flow of doing it. The last 5, they're the ones that count the most, okay? And of course, if your goal is to get stronger, it would make sense to maybe reduce the rep range so that you can lift more weight. And then when you can lift more weight, then you can do more reps on that weight further down the line, okay? But generally speaking, you do need to use a variety. But in my app, you will find most rep ranges are between 5 to 10. Let's talk about food a little bit. One of the biggest mistakes which most people make is down to reducing their calories. More often than not, too much too soon. Okay, you don't really need to be doing this. Okay, if most people, for whatever reason, they get this inspiration to want to sort out their physique and look better, automatically by just going to the gym more and just being a little bit more sensible with their diet and cleaning it up, you've automatically probably created a little bit of a calorie deficit, or you've reduced the surplus. So that's progress. You don't need to start doing this excessive cardio, pulling back the calories, because you're just in a huge deficit to begin with, which is going to be a problem to allow for continued fat loss in the long run. Stick to eating whole foods. My rule of thumb is eat food that's in its natural state. Avoid foods which are heavily processed. 3 to 4 meals per day, I would recommend. Of course, that's not going to necessarily be suitable for everyone, but I've just found if your goal is to improve your chances of building as much muscle as possible, getting a steady hit of protein throughout the day is going to put your body in an environment for that to happen. If you fast all day and you want to consume all your calories in one meal, sure, that's going to help with weight loss, assuming you're in a deficit, but it's not going to be great for maintaining muscle or even building muscle. Absolute minimum 3 per day. 4 per day is good. You can do 5 if you want, but I feel like the 5 to 6 meals per day is largely unnecessary. Protein intake. I think most people tend to feel as though they need to be eating loads of protein, when in reality, a lot of the recent studies that have come out, 1.6 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight is a good sweet spot. The only time that I would change that is if you are a lot older or if you are in a calorie deficit. If you're in a calorie deficit, I'd bump it up to 1.8, 1.9. There's no need to follow these fad diets or extreme diets like carnivore or keto. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want to lose this last bit of fat, so I'm just going to go keto and I'm not going to eat carbs. Well, first of all, it's actually really hard to stick to going low to no carbs. It's a lot of work. Then secondly, what most people do is because they eliminate an entire macronutrient group, they don't replace it with the fats or the protein. And they end up just being in too much of a calorie deficit. And guess what happens? They just lose a load of size and their sessions are terrible. So there's no need to do that. You literally can have your carbs, you can have your fats, get your protein in. As long as the total calories is where you want it to be, you can make progress. Eat satiating foods. This one's really important, right? A lot of people may not know that potatoes, white boiled potatoes, are one of the most filling foods that you could possibly eat. So if you're on a diet and you want to feel full, eat potatoes, right? Same goes for white fish, oatmeals, apples, oranges, some fruit. You want to eat the foods which leave you feeling full. Otherwise, if you don't, you end up craving more food. You can pack more calories in. And then macro calculators. You need to take these with a pinch of salt. A lot of people come up to me and they're like, how do I know what I should eat? How do I calculate my macros? They go onto these websites, put in their data, and it's not taking into account what your eating habits have been, okay, previously. For example, if you've been eating 1,500 calories per day and you've been doing that for months, this macro calculator might say, okay, well, based on what your goals are and your stats, you should eat 3,000 calories per day. You go from minus 1,500 to 3,000, you're going to gain fat, okay? It needs to be a gradual transition. My recommendation would be to make a food log, right, just for a couple of days. You write down everything you eat, everything you drink, and as best you possibly can, you calculate how many calories you consume on a daily basis. Same with protein, carbs, and fats. And then based on that, you can see, oh, okay, I need to make these changes. I need to maybe bump up my calories a little bit or down. I need to eat more protein. I need to pull back on the fats, right? And then you do that, you're consistent with this new way of eating, with these targets you've set for yourself. And then based on how your body responds, you change that, right? You have a little look, you adjust, readjust to ensure that you can continue hitting those goals that you want for yourself. This one is very interesting. This is so common. This is the yo-yo diet graph. This is where so many people go through the cycles of bulking, cutting, bulking, cutting, bulking, cutting. And in reality, they end up not actually being that much bigger than the person who just very gradually lean bulks, okay? Someone has asked me how to go from 30% body fat to 15% body fat and stay there. I'm going to explain this later. I've got a graph just for you. When is the right time to start a cut? Well, hopefully if you've done things properly, as I said, you don't need to actually be going on a cut because you've not allowed yourself to get too fat. So if you have actually got too fat, then it's probably going to make sense for you to start the cut. But again, it just needs to be very gradual. You get down to the body fat percentage that you want to be at, and then you don't allow yourself to get too fat again. That's the simple thing. There will never ever be a need for you to do a cut if you don't get fat in the first place. So that's the thing we need to try and avoid as much as possible. Someone said, I'm on a 3,000 calorie bulk. So 3,000 calories per day. I can't get my 10,000 steps in because of work and I'm getting some fat. Would 15 minutes of step master after each session be enough? That's fine. Doing a little bit of cardio after the session. I usually like to separate both, but an even easier thing for you to do would maybe just pull back the calories a little bit. Okay, so instead of having 3,000, do 2,900 or 2,800. It sounds like if you are getting a little bit fat, you're probably in too much of a surplus. What is my current split? I'm actually repeating the push-pull legs upper lower because it was that good. I don't think I've ever progressed as much in terms of weights lifted than I have with that particular split. So I'm running it up again before I start a new one. What are the biggest mistakes that guys make in their 30s when they want to build a lean and athletic physique? I think first of all, a lot of people, if they are starting in their 30s or 40s, they just think they're too late. You know, they've left it too late, so they can't achieve their goals of having a particular physique, which is not true. And I would say, to be honest, it's the same mistakes that people are making in their 20s. The same in your 30s. Things haven't really changed as much. You can definitely get in peak physique in your 30s. Maybe in your 40s things would change a little bit more, but 30s I think is quite similar to 20s. Someone says, I've upped my protein, I'm 42 years old, been training for 22 years consistently. I have always struggled to build more mass. I'm always 10 to 12% body fat due to being so active. Any tips? I'm taking 150 to 160 grams of protein daily, currently sitting at 73 kilograms. It really is just a case of eating a little bit more. Now, this just takes a little bit of planning. If you're not tracking at the moment, then that's the first problem. You need to start tracking, right? At least for a period of time. You may be in a scenario where, like, okay, if you do track and it turns out you're eating 3,000 calories per day, start eating 3,200 calories per day. And if you do that consistently, your weight is going to start going up. I mean, that's as simple as it is, right? If you're not tracking, you're not going to be able to make that progress. And this is what, when people ask me, like, oh, do I need to track? Well, if you are seeing progress in the gym and you're getting, your body is changing the way you want it to change, then you can get away with not tracking. Like, I didn't track to begin with for a long period of time, and I saw results. But then I remember I was at university and I was stuck at 88 kilograms, and it just would not shift. And I was like, why can I not put on any more weight? And then I did some research, learned about nutrition, and realized I just wasn't eating enough. And I wasn't eating enough protein, I don't think, as well. So eating a little bit more protein, eating more calories, all of a sudden my weight started to go up. The only issue is with people who struggle to gain a bit of size is that they have such fast metabolisms or are so active, it just means they need to eat like way more. Like some people I used to coach in the past, they needed to consume over 4,000 calories a day to just gain weight, and they were like literally shredded. So that took a lot of planning, ensuring that all the food they needed to eat was always available, and that they could squeeze the calories in without the foods being too excessively large in volume. So consuming calorie-dense foods, just finding out ways to squeeze calories in, putting oils in, having like fattier cuts of meat and fish, having nuts like granola, like things like that, just to ensure that they were hitting their targets.
What about people with low appetite?
If you got low appetite, tough shit. No. If you got low appetite, it's a case where you just have to kind of force yourself a little bit. Eating earlier on in the day definitely helps. And as I said, it's just one of those things where sometimes you just have to eat because it's going to give you your desired goal. Like there's sometimes I will eat a meal and I'm like, this is a pretty boring meal. I don't want to have it. I'd rather have a burger. But I know it's got the nutrients in it that I need, and it's fuel for me performing at my best and hitting my targets. So I'm not always looking at food and be like, oh, this is a pleasurable thing. It's the thing which is necessary for me to consume in order to look or be a certain way.
The greasy nicotine.
Yeah, or like, you know, stop drinking so much coffee or smoking cigarettes or having the snus, nicotine. There's a lot of things that can suppress your appetite, so you want to avoid doing those things. What brand of creatine would I recommend? Bionic, obviously, but to be honest, all creatine monohydrate forms are pretty good. Arms have been stuck at 15 inches, tried everything, don't know what to do from here. I don't know if you tried everything. Sounds like there's been a lack of progress in terms of progression with weights lifted. So it makes sense, yes, if you're training arms, you need to train them twice per week, maybe even 3 times per week. So make sure you're following a split, which is targeting biceps, triceps in such a way. Problem with doing push-pull legs is the biceps and triceps get trained at the end of the session. So maybe it'd be worth doing an additional arm-focused session whereby at the start of the session, you're already hitting biceps and triceps when they're fresh. That can help, and then just ensuring you're tracking and lifting heavier each week. Maybe go through a period of time where you lower the number of working sets, and the reps. So you go through a little bit of a strength phase. Because if you can actually work on improving the strength of your arms, they will be in a better position to tolerate lifting more weight for more reps. When will I integrate all the workouts into Whoop? That's something I want to do, although I want the Whoop and the Oura Ring integration into Thirst. And the reason how that would be extremely beneficial is it would basically kind of recommend to you which sessions to do on which day based on recovery. For example, green recovery, high HRV, you do the hardest sessions, or you could even train twice per day. Low recovery, in the red, maybe take the rest day. Recently, I stated that 2.2 grams per kilogram is too much protein intake and recommended 1.7. I didn't say too much protein, I just said not necessary. I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe over-consuming protein a little bit, particularly if you're on a cut or if you're over 40s. I would rather be in a position where I have it, but don't necessarily need it, as opposed to needing it and not having it, right? So consuming a little bit more protein is like an insurance policy, and there's nothing wrong with having 2.2 grams per kilogram. But I wouldn't stress out if you're not hitting that target. See any other good questions? What do I think about HIIT training once a week? I think HIIT training is good. HIIT training I would use more of a tool for overall conditioning and working on overall cardiovascular health. High intensity training like that is good for the heart, but not necessarily needed for like losing calories. Losing body fat. If you do too much HIIT, you usually end up straining your body a little bit too much and impacting recovery. Hi Mike, should you do carb cycling and should the protein intake be the same each day? Carb cycling I would only really recommend doing if you are going to be having excessively high days of carb consumption for whatever reason that might be. It's definitely not needed for example, losing body fat, because you can do that just by being in a little bit of a deficit. But let's say, for example, if I was going to have a cheat meal and there's going to be a friggin' load of carbs on that particular day, then to reduce the damage that cheat meal does, then I would go low carb for a couple of days, deplete my glycogen stores, and then have that cheat meal refeed day. And usually the excess carbohydrates would get absorbed by the muscle and converted into glycogen. But I've tried it before and I just find that the low carb days are just not very fun and they suck. But I do tend to go lower carb on days that I don't train. Someone's asking for meal recommendations. If you want meal recommendations and recipe recommendations, it's all inside of the app, my friend. What do I think of the Arnold routine? I think I was thinking about putting this into the app, and then I saw just how much friggin' volume he was doing, that I decided not to, because most people would do it and just literally destroy themselves. Maybe I will consider putting it in and just saying like, be prepared to feel terrible. But I'd say someone like Arnold, when he was training like twice a day or in the gym for 2 or 3 hours, that's way too much. And he was taking a load of steroids. So usually the same rules don't apply to natural lifters. When increasing weight on an exercise, other muscles will often get involved in the movement, or more tension on that particular muscle. Is it worth not dropping the weight and continuing as the target muscle is being worked to some degree? I think this is a tricky one. So if you were to lift heavier and you felt like other muscle groups were getting more involved, maybe a problem if that tension was taken away from the working muscle. But if that working muscle was still experiencing a high degree of mechanical tension, but other muscle groups were coming in to help with that, I don't see that as being much of a problem. I think the main problem comes with increasing the weight and it actually potentially doing harm in terms of higher risk of injury. So my rule of thumb when increasing the weight usually is to just maybe do 1 or 2 fewer reps, because at least you can still keep solid form and keep the tension on the working muscle. You know, usually if you do like more repetitions, things get a little bit sloppier. So not necessary. Been on the app since 2018, the GOAT. Oh, I love that. That's a loyal subscriber there. Hi Mike, what about cardio in the morning and muscle training in the evening to get in shape combined with calorie deficit? I think that's fine. I think you just need to decide when would you get the best out of your training sessions, because ultimately the training session is the priority. So try both. If you feel like your performance in the training session is better in the morning compared to the evening, then do it in the morning. But if you feel like it's better in the evening compared to the morning, then keep it for the evening. It's ultimately down to you. I think the benefit of doing it in the evening is you got more meals in your system. You probably won't be training fasted, but the problem with that is that if it's the evening, you might be a little bit more tired, okay, depending on what you've done on that day. So mix and match. Try it for yourself. Someone said, I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to cook. Well, you do. Like, there's a way of making time to cook. If you look at my old videos, you'll find that I could actually do a meal prep for a whole day in like 20 to 25 minutes. So you do have time. If you don't want to do that, then just buy the food. But then you'll probably tell me that you can't afford it, doing meal prep. So don't let that be an excuse as to why you can't see results. Hi.
Zoom chat.
Yeah, for the lifetime offer, the link is in the Zoom chat,
Resources section.
in the resources section. So you better not miss out, guys. Hello, Mike. Is it possible to spread your latest split, push-pull upper lower, push-pull legs upper lower on a 10-day instead of 7 days? Yeah. So it's quite interesting. With the programs, obviously it's by week, and a week is 7 days, but there's no issue in you spreading it out over an 8-day or 9-day period. So you can class your weeks in this time frame instead of it being 7 days. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But obviously I wouldn't spread it out over like a 2-week period because it wouldn't really make sense. Should I do a warm-up set before each exercise? I think the need for warm-ups is more important at the start of the session versus at the end of the session. But for someone like me who's lifting very heavy, I still need to do like maybe a 1 to 2 rep warm-up as the weight gets heavier, just to minimize injury. That's the only reason why I'm doing it. But generally speaking, as you are progressing through the session, your body should be pretty warmed up and ready to handle it. Will I implement a custom workout function within my app? This one is a massive question I get asked regularly. People are like, Mike, can I build my own split? There's a way that I want to do this, but it needs to be done in a way so that you don't end up doing loads of garbage volume. Okay, like if most people, beginners, intermediate lifters who don't really have a full understanding of all of this, were given the freedom to make their own programs, the program would be all over the place. It would be a mess. So there would need to be certain rules and regulations as to how you customize your own program, which there's definitely a way of doing it, but this is something which I think would be really cool. So that feature, creating your own split with it actually being effective, and then on top of that, maybe just doing like a one-off. Second of all, when you do a bro split, usually the second half of the session, the muscle is already fatigued and not conditioned, and the performance that you get out of that muscle group for the second half of the session is just not very good. You can't lift as heavy because it's fatigued. The reason why these elite athletes can get away with it is because they've conditioned their bodies to be able to tolerate that amount of volume on a muscle in a single training session. I remember I did shoulders with Ryan Terry before his Olympia win. Literally 20, 30 minutes into the session, my shoulders were done. They were spent. Okay, I'd done what I'd needed to do. But then we went and trained shoulders for another 30 minutes. And it was just like, my body was not adapted to train like that. His was, because he'd conditioned himself to train in that particular way, so he was able to tolerate it. And that's just the way it is. So I think it's absolutely not an optimal split to follow. I have it in the app still, because it's a fun thing to do. But it's generally not the most optimal. Next question. How much rest would you recommend between sets, for example, push session? I think this is very dependent upon the individual. Right, take for example me. I've done a very heavy demanding set of hack squats for 8 reps. I probably need to rest a good couple of minutes before I do my second set in order to achieve that same level of intensity, because that first set was so demanding for the sheer amount of weight I was lifting, like 6 plates either side. Now, if you're a beginner, you maybe have 1 plate either side. That particular set is not going to be nowhere near as demanding on your body. So arguably, it will be much quicker for your heart rate to go back down and for you to be able to push at that same level of intensity for the second set. It's also worth mentioning your overall conditioning. Now, if you do cardio alongside your training, you're a fit person, you do conditioning, you do your HIIT training, you will find that your recovery is much quicker in between sets. I notice this. When I do complementary cardio sessions, whether it's HIIT or walking on the treadmill, and I'm fit and I'm eating good, I'm like, hey, it's actually quicker for me to recover in between sets. It's quicker for my heart rate to return back down to normal. So how much weight you're lifting, level of experience, and overall fitness and conditioning is going to have an impact on how long you need to rest in between those sessions. What are my thoughts on fat burners? I think they are a load of garbage, and it's just marketing to get you to buy supplements which don't actually do what they say they do on the label. How do I decide when to increase the weight versus repeating the same weight with better control and form? That's quite a good question. Because you could argue if you were to do the same weight the following week, but you feel like your execution and the tension on the working muscle was superior to the previous week, then I would argue that that's actually progress. It's not necessarily progressive overload, but you are making progress. So it would ultimately get to the point where you don't want to be doing the same weight for week on end. Okay, so maybe 1 to 2 weeks where your form has improved, but ultimately you need to get to a point where you're actually lifting a little bit heavier. Any more questions?
What the offer is.
The offer, new people have joined the chat. Now, an hour and a half after, the offer is lifetime access to my app, for those who don't know.
Show it. Now go to the board.
Oh, no, I'm comfortable here. I'm enjoying this seat. Yeah, lifetime access to my app, which is something I've never ever done before, which is pretty crazy considering you're going to see all these improvements to the app over the next couple of years. And you're not going to need to pay anything extra on top of that. Outrageous. So this is literally the only opportunity that you're going to get to take advantage of that. It won't be happening again. I don't feel really tired or fatigued anymore. And I've noticed my strength go up and there not being that much soreness. So it's quite relative, but that works for me. What's that? How can you adjust your macros if you... What should I do if for 2 or 3 months I've been in a deficit but not losing as much as I should? Losing as much what? Fat? Weight? As I said before, you probably have this goal of being super shredded. Now, if your starting point is 20% body fat and you want to be shredded, you can't achieve that goal in a short period of time. It's just not realistic, and it would just be so intense to try and even get close to losing that amount of body fat in just a short period of time. So you got to look at it at the long run, okay? Be patient with it. Go through those periods of cuts, but not cutting for too long. And most important thing, just don't allow yourself to get fat again. That's really it, okay? It takes time. It really does. And I know there's a lot of people that want to be they might look at me and be like, oh, I want to look like you. And it's like, okay, well, let's just understand that I've been training for 18 years and I've been consistent every single week of those 18 years. There's been 2 weeks. I've missed the gym for 1 week on 2 occasions. That is it, all right? That's just an idea to give you in order to actually look like crazy, okay? That, it's just dedication over a very long period of time. Small efforts.
Hi, Mike. Sorry, cool. So I'm gonna present my screen to be able to give these giveaways. I've set something up really cool. I'm gonna show you guys. All right. So it was a bit tough putting out people's names, so apologies. I had to do emails. So essentially, we're gonna hit spin the wheel wherever it lands on. Mike, do you want to pick what you want to give out first from the 4 things? Let's leave the 1-to-1 till the last. If you want to pick, and essentially I'll hit spin the wheel wherever it lands on. You are the winner. What I'm gonna do is enable the chat in Zoom. Just give me a sec. You just want to, I don't know where you're based. We'll be in touch to make that happen. Cool. Which brings me, I guess, to the last one. You get a 1-to-1 with yourself. So whoever wins this, the big one. Are we ready? Let me shuffle it. Cool. Let's go.
It's the big one. 1 hour with me.
Is it gonna be? It's Chana Hansen, if that's your name. Congratulations. If you're in the chat, just check the Q&A mic. If you're here, if you've left though, then you're disqualified.
Yeah, it sucks to be you if you're not here.
Cool. I will stop presenting. And back to you, Mike, to wrap up and close up.
Yeah, cool. So I've enjoyed that. Obviously, difficult for me to try and get through every single question, but I hope I've answered at least some of them and helped you out. As I've said, it can be fairly straightforward as long as you master the basics. For those that have missed some of this call, you'll have the opportunity to watch the whole thing again. An email will be sent out to you so you can rewatch. And then to summarize, lifetime offer, you buy the app, access forever, no additional cost. Pretty crazy opportunity, to be honest, which I've never done before. Probably never going to do it again. So I hope you've all enjoyed this. Again, thank you for all the continued support with watching videos, for those who've already signed up for the app and been long-time members of the app. Love you guys, and I'm going to do my very best to just keep improving upon it and making it just like the best app possible. Because as I've said, like, this is something which I use, and I want it to also help me with my progress and my goals long into the future. So yeah, I guess I'll see you guys soon. And of course, YouTube videos coming up on the main channel and the coaching channel. And if you do have any suggestions or recommendations for what videos you want me to make for the coaching channel, just leave comments on the videos, the coaching videos, and I'll try to get it done. So I want to get you all in shape, and I want to try and clarify everything as much as possible so that when you're putting the efforts in, you're doing the right things and not wasting precious time and energy. Cool.